It is Florida State football talk here at the Voice of College Football on another Wednesday. So you know what that means. There's got to be a legal update from the battle against the ACC. So we will get to it. And of course, the offseason will soon make our way into spring football. That'll be fun here very soon and actually have some football to talk about. But in the meantime, win totals have been released here in the last week to 10 days. We will catch up with those as well. Plenty to talk about, including your comments and questions coming in that we always enjoy. So pull up for the next hour. We're talking Florida State football. We got two of the best right here. Chris Frazier, Spear Addicts, and of course, George Georgitis, the Renegade Report. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Pretty good.
Chris, we know you got a ton going on, so thank you. You know that for being here. Appreciate you taking the time. And so we're going to go to you first and foremost about the latest in the battle of lawsuits and Florida State's attempt to get out of this entire ACC mess and where it stands right now.
Yeah, I'll try to make the legal talk as short as possible as far as the actual amendments and all that stuff. But in a short story, Florida State filed an amendment to get the lawsuit in North Carolina that the ACC first filed against us on the possibility that they knew what we were doing. Florida State put an amendment out to get that one dropped. And then in the meantime, the ACC filed an amendment, which was a 42-page amendment that stated to get the legality stuff in the state of Florida dropped on the lawsuit that Florida State filed against the ACC. But what's important in the measures of what the ACC did, there was a particular paragraph that they put in there and said that Florida State has the possibility of buying back their grant of rights. In more layman terms of what that means, an understanding is that the ACC is basically coming out and stating, we are more than willing to start negotiating your buying rights to get your grant of rights back. The question becomes, well, does Florida State does that mean we're going to start negotiating at the $572 million? Does that mean we're going to start negotiating at $300 million? Or are we going to start from zero? I can put it like this. Florida State's going to start at zero. And I would assume that the ACC is going to start somewhere around the $300-something million mark. Why are those numbers important? The basic reason that I would say that they would start at the $300 million, maybe even $200-something million, is because technically Florida State only has to buy their rights till 2027. Why is that? Because ESPN has the option to completely drop the TV rights and buying those TV rights from the ACC in a totality, not just Florida State, but the ACC in total in 2027, because the contract doesn't go longer than that. So in reality, the contract is only till 2027, where we've all been told 2036 for the past couple of years. Everyone's understanding was this contract was good until 2036 and that we would be breaking a contract for those amount of years. The truth of the matter is, because it's a one-sided contract, therefore, if ESPN has an option to opt out of the contract in 2027, which there's the end of the 2026 season, then Florida State should only have to pay for 2025, 2026, and 2027. The reason that the $150 million mark is why James is the first one that started putting it out there, stating that it would be $150 million. The reason being is because you're buying out 3 years at about $42.5 million a year, plus a couple of penalties, blah, blah, blah. Evens out somewhere around $150 million. So the reason that all of this is important is because you're going to get the lawsuit in North Carolina that's going to drop. The question that I have is, will the state of Florida drop the lawsuit in Florida? I don't think that they will, based off of you're an entity in Florida. You are contracted that if you're going to have any lawsuits with a state facility of the state of Florida, you have to sue us in the state of Florida or come to our state to go off of a lawsuit that we have sued you for. I don't know that they do, but the ACC is going to basically turn and say, look, let's drop the lawsuits, let's go to the negotiation table, and let's negotiate this thing out. That's important because they don't want any more skeletons coming out. Also, in that amendment, they put that they wanted some of the things that were said sealed. They don't want anybody else to see them. Don't know how that does them any good on the metrics that everybody's already seen it. It's already been made public, so hiding it doesn't take it away, doesn't make it disappear, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. But if they an understanding of what I got was if they get this one sealed, then anything that comes out thereafter could possibly get sealed so that it would not hit the public eye. That's not going to be possible because Florida, one, isn't going to say yes to that. Two, the sunshine law that is in Florida won't allow that. So they're not going to get what they're asking for as far as sealing things, but they will possibly get the opportunity to start negotiating with the university and get this thing hashed out where there is no court, there is no more skeletons drawn out. Um, I personally think that we leave for somewhere between 30 to 50 million as far as the grant of rights portion of it, and then we might spend 25 million for the penalty of leaving the conference in totality. So somewhere around 75 to 100 million dollars is what Florida State should get out for. And what's really important is the board of trustees about 3 weeks ago, they they put out that they were voting to allow Florida State athletics to receive the loan from the board of trustees, which is therefore the endowment of Florida State. That's educational, research, you name it. So they're going to loan the athletic department of Florida State up to $300 million to get out of the ACC. So that's why all of this is important because it's starting to move a lot faster. The prediction is they think this thing will be over by June or July. Some people are even predicting it in March. Um, I would say I would lean toward the end of June, early July. Um, so it's going to be somewhere in that range of we'll find out what Florida State's future looks like, and then therefore after once the negotiations done with the ACC, I think directly after that's announced that we are buying our way out of the ACC, Florida State will then announce the conference that they will be entering based off of the knowledge that we're leaving.
Okay, so I had about 8 or 10 questions lined up, and I think you answered just about all of them, except for right at the tail end, Chris. You think Florida State's going to be able to negotiate and finalize something with another conference while they're still in the ACC so they can make this one smooth transition and get this turned around for 2025?
Yeah, and the reason that I believe that is because I believe it's already been done. Um, and I know that sounds bad, but in the attraction that Florida State started this conversation that I've been talking about this, and James Coleman has been talking about this for the past 2 years. This isn't a new conversation for people that are keeping up with what's going on in Florida State's talk in between the president, the athletic director, the board of trustees. Like those conversations have been had. We didn't just come up with a guess and say, hey, Florida State wants to get out of the ACC. We heard that, and that was from very valuable people that said so. And we also was told who valued Florida State at the most. And that's from hearsay. Of course, all of this has to be hearsay. There's no contract. There's no official offer to come to any conference because that would be illegal. But that doesn't mean conversations don't happen. That doesn't mean, well, yeah, if y'all ever left the ACC, man, we would love to have you, and we would do this, and that's down the road, maybe 2036, ha ha ha, that kind of thing. Like those conversations, luckily, person to person conversations cannot all be monitored the way that everybody expects the NCAA to do so. So, in my eyes, I think that Florida State makes a smooth transition. My prediction has been the Big Ten for a long time. But I will be honest with people, and I have not said this anywhere yet. The SEC is going to make this a bidding war 100%. They're not just going to allow the Big Ten to take Florida State and so on. I think that the SEC is going to make a odd offer, if that makes sense. It'll be out of the realm of just what the SEC pays schools, because right now when you enter the SEC conference, you're there 3 to 5 years without getting any payment. And that's like Oklahoma, Texas. They just went through this. They have to be in the league in the conference for 3 years before they start receiving full member money. They will receive some, but they will never. The first 3 to 5 years, they won't receive the full amount of 80 some odd $million. So I think that conversation changes. The only way that you can get Florida State to say no to the Big Ten is by telling them that you'll start paying them in full from the get-go. How that works, I don't know. There's legality stuff that they're going to have to work out and figure all that out. But I don't think the SEC is just going to say, all right, y'all take Florida State, y'all take North Carolina, y'all take so-and-so. We're just going to let it happen. That's going to weaken their conference in the manner that you're strengthening the Big Ten so much. So I think there's going to be a bidding war for a few schools. But I think Florida State's going to be the one that has to go through the process first, as they went through this process first with the ACC. It'll be a much faster process for any of those that want to leave the ACC thereafter, because now it's already been done. So now you're basically, it's going to be a floodgate of negotiations that come out from universities to the ACC that say they want to leave. We'll see exactly how that goes. The ACC could play hard to get. They could say, no, it's not happening. There could be a number of things that happen that transition that into only Florida State is in the realignment conversation the year one, as in 2025. Or this could move in a manner so much quicker than people can anticipate, that the ACC is just going to take as much money from each one of these universities as they can to keep themselves alive for as long as they can. Because in my eyes, and maybe it's because I'm biased, but if Florida State leaves the ACC is, unless they could pull Notre Dame, they couldn't do that with Florida State. So how are they going to do it without them? So I don't see that happening. But that's the only thing that could save grace to that any schools would want to stay in the ACC that have a manner to land somewhere else. Because unfortunately, in the traditional lies, this is going to a Power 2 conference. It's not no longer a Power 4. It's not going to be a Power 5. It's already not a Power 5. And unfortunately, like the Big 12 and some others are not going to be a portion of the Big 2, because it's just, there's going to be levels to this. And there already is. It's just, this is going to make it publicly known that there's 2 conferences that matter more than the rest. And if you're not in one of those 2 conferences, you're going to have a harder time getting into the 12-team playoff. So should be a bunch of schools get pissed off, and I'm looking forward to it, because I want to repay everyone that talked about Florida State being loud and trying to get out of the conference and thinking we're too good for the conference. But when they start saying they're too good for the conference, there's going to be a lot of payback from Florida State fans to those fan bases that came after us.
I am fascinated at most of all the money situation and how that has dropped from pushing $1 billion to what it could be. George, before we let you go, of course, we want to say hi and welcome James. James, we always appreciate you being here. You got so much going on, so thank you for being here. George, go.
Yeah, you brought up the money thing, and Chris brought up the different bidding wars and the difference between North Carolina and Florida. In North Carolina, there would be a chance that the judge could mete out a sentence somewhere in the middle of that 500 million, all the way down to a 30 or 50 million. In Florida, if they take it to court, it's either all or nothing. I agree with Chris. I think the one in North Carolina is most likely to be dropped out because of the legislation that we've talked about inside the grant of rights. There's actually a paragraph that pretty much spells it out that this thing has to be tried in Florida. And within the state of Florida, like we said, it's all or nothing. And so that's why you see already the ACC coming out in this 151-page document, start to lay the roadmap for settlement talks for Florida State be able to pay their way out. And another thing we've saw since the last time we've spoken with you as well is a big time FOIA dump from this guy, Bill Farley, over at Substack. And within that, all that documentation, it lays out how Florida State is going to pay for all this stuff. And there's going to be a bidding war to take over that debt, whatever it is. If it's $200 million, if that's what the settlement is, and it's going to cost you another $200 million to operate, maybe you don't get money from the Big Ten for the first 3 years, like Chris was alluding to. Maybe that happens. They've got so many different plans in place. Like they're building that football only facility, but it's also a partnership with a giant medical real estate company who they're going to lease the land to. They've got all kind of different things that they've done, and they're going to use private equity. Everything is in place. Like Chris has said, the whole move to the Big Ten, the big move into more and more research kind of things within the university, it's all planned, and a ton of that stuff is redacted, but it's all planned for. We've talked about and just about the cost being between like 125, 200 million is kind of what me and Jen have kind of been guessing over on our channel the whole time. And it goes right with what Chris was saying about it's actually through 2027. That's another big part, I think, with this latest batch of filings. I think ESPN, that 28 through 2036, like it's just, there's no chance. They're never going to pick that up. So it's only going to be, that's just through 27. That's going to be the main thing. And I still stand with, I think the settlement would be there somewhere between 125 and $200 million, just because of the fact the max value, if you max it out through 27, would it be about 300 million? And the ACC is going to have to, they're going to have to give up some ground somewhere. So I don't see FSU paying more than 200 million, but I could also see, like Chris was saying, a possibility of it's 30 to 50 million. And there's just some stipulation in there where you don't get paid in the Big Ten. But make no mistake, Florida State, when it comes to the money, they're ready. They have a plan, and they don't just have one plan. They have 6 plans in place.
James.
I mean, I don't really have much to add to that. I mean, it's basically, I mean, anybody, I guess it's more of a thing where now people can kind of see it. But before, everybody was just like, it was easy to clown, but at the end of the day, like, fiscally, it's irresponsible to be able to be in a situation where you're 30 mil behind. And what I always joke on Chris's show and everybody else's show, you don't have to be an insider as much as you have to have an ability to read tea leaves and understand business. I mean, you can't keep seeing everybody else make these moves and then you sit there and sit still. And that's why it's kind of in this world where all we do is troll. And it's unfortunate because it's dumbed down what we have as America in general. Like, why would you stay somewhere where you're treated as a second tier? So, like, even Florida State getting knocked out or kept out because of whatever reasons people believe they should have been. And I'm not here to argue any of those things. If I'm everybody else in the ACC, if I'm anybody in the Big 12, if I'm anybody anywhere else, I'm mad because we already had these fears of a Power 2. And if you look at the announcements that have been made about the college football invitational, and they're saying, like, there are bids for one conference to have four automatic slots, which means that another conference was going to want to have 4 automatic slots, which means you're going to only have, that's 8. So you have 4 other teams to be split between all the other the non-Power 2 conferences. And you can already see it going down this path. So what really should have happened was everybody should have took a step back and said, this is what's best for everyone else in college football. But I mean, hey, at the end of the day, I kind of people have the same face. But anybody who didn't believe that this was going to that this was going to really go in this route was just being, I don't know, man. I don't even know the word for it, but that wouldn't sound disrespectful, but foolish. I would say foolish at best. But I mean, also, again, one thing I know about people who know me, if this stuff wasn't kind of the reason why I've not been vocal, but said, like, hey, we're going to get out, they would have just said, James, this is like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, the guys would, and they would be like, James, no, that's a fairy tale. But when you see them smile or when you see them say other stuff, it also lets you know that they have a plan. And one thing I will say, much like, I think Doug Rohan came on the show and he talked about it more like a divorce, which, again, there is no such thing as an ironclad contract. This is more of a divorce than it is anything else. So when I think about that, most people don't get divorced without having other options. Doesn't mean you're going to have another dating option. It just means that you kind of already know what the world looks like minus the relationship with that person. Same thing if you don't like that, it's too dark, get it. I'm not mad at you. Think about it as, like, right now, I cover the NFL. You know what we're about to do in the NFL? We're about to have the tampering period. If you don't believe tampering happens in the NFL, then I don't know what to tell you. But nobody jumped. Actually, it was funny. I just listened to something where Tom Brady was talking about what happened with how Randy Moss got to request a trade, and that's clearly was tampering. Like, they ran into each other for 5 minutes Randy was at the Patriots hotel for some reason when they were playing, ran into each other, and my man said that's when the whole process started. Trust me, conversations have been had, whether it's just coffee conversations or just in jest. But to think that Florida State went into this thing blind without a plan is, again, foolish.
The occurrences of the last couple of weeks, nothing surprised me except for one thing. Just that there was this revelation, as Chris outlined, that the contract, the television contract between ESPN and the ACC did not follow through all the way to the end of the grant of rights, that there is this opportunity, this window in 2027, which makes sense because we just learned a couple days ago with the reformatting of the college football playoff from a 6+6 to a 5+7, and also with us going to a 12-team playoff sooner than it was anticipated, that we knew that ESPN's contract with the college football playoff ran through 2027, 2026. So it ran through 26, and it's had to be tweaked and renegotiated to fit the 12 teams. That I don't know why it was never discovered. It just seems strange to me that nobody has had this information before the last few days, that this grant of rights didn't coincide with ESPN's agreement with the ACC.
That's not quite true.
No, this has been, we've been talking
that's
about it
been
for a
known.
while.
That we've actually talked about that like over the summer. Like it, but to your defense, Mark, it's newer information. I didn't know this 2 years ago. I found this all out this year, but the reason why is nobody knows. Like literally, the television contract is kept like you know how Coca-Cola, they got, if you go to Atlanta Coca-Cola factory, they show you that big old room with the safe. That's where the secret Coca-Cola formula is held. That's what in somewhere in Charlotte or wherever the ACC headquarters is, there's some vault with the ESPN television contract in there. And you can only get a chance to peek at it. You can't screenshot it, can't take pictures, and you can't take anything back home with you. And once I realized that, that's why they really don't want this to go to trial in Florida, because you're going to have to present that. And in presenting that is going to make somebody look very, very foolish. And really just up to this point, Swafford looks like he was just having nepotism up to this point. The contract was very shoddily made in general. It was really just made, okay, we got to throw a bone to somebody. Let me make my son look good with Jefferson Pilot Sports, and we're going to roll with this. And it still didn't work out. And you've had numerous opportunities to go back and to fix it, and you still haven't fixed it. And it just even arguing right now that you don't have the conference doesn't have a fiduciary responsibility to the teams, but the teams have a fiduciary responsibility to the conference. It's asinine. That literally the whole purpose of us getting together is to band together so we can negotiate better contracts. But you're not doing that. So like a lot of this stuff is really, Florida State had to push. We want to see what's in the contract. And if it really was as good as what everybody says, you know what they would have just done? Just given up the contract. But they know it's some wild stuff in that contract, which is why they won't just give it up.
Find this comment from Talk Is Pitt a bit interesting, in that I understand you don't care about Florida State. You don't have an interest in a rivalry because those two schools are disconnected, even though they play in the same conference. They've been in separate divisions, so they only play one every 7 years and all that other business. But I think you're missing something here. Florida State is arguably the hottest commodity and the most valuable commodity in the conference. And so once they take their product away from the ACC, you're on the borderline of being, I'm not saying that Pitt's going to be left out for sure, but they're certainly not a guaranteed part of the relevant two, the power two that's going to go forward. So Florida State's actions here certainly put the likes of Pitt and others in jeopardy.
Oh, no doubt, man. Like everybody's kind of hinted on it, and I've got a pretty good idea if we want to get into it of how it's all going to settle when conference realignment ends. But you're basically going to end up, when you hear power two, that means the ACC and the Pitts of the world, if they can't find a way to get to that Big Ten or that SEC school, when Florida State and Clemson are gone carrying ACC, you've basically become a G5. I think it's like basically, and I'll let everybody else talk, but I think you're going to end up with the power two of Big Ten of SEC, and then either the ACC and the Big 12 are going to have to merge, like the Big 12 offered the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 said, no, we're worth too much. We're not merging with you. Well, we see what happened to the Big 12. They're down to 2 teams. Somehow Oklahoma or Oregon State, Wazoo have to get with the Big 12 and the ACC. They're going to have to, whatever, drop their egos and get together and see if they can do something to move together. Because if they don't, even then they still don't have a chance. They've got to keep Florida State and Clemson, because if they go, the best chance they have to be is like a relegation league. It's like a little bit ahead of G5, but you'd have a league below the Big Ten and the SEC where you just hope maybe one day you can get into the party. And then below them, I guess it would be just basically Division II at that point, with your AACs and your Sun Belt and your Midwest Conference and FCS right there below them. So they're going to have to figure out something, especially if Florida State and Clemson leave. Once that's over, the ACC's done. So I know Pitt may not enjoy Florida State or care nothing about them. It's like, if you want to be a part of a power conference, Florida State, Clemson, this is what makes the ACC a power conference. So the days are fleeting.
Here's my thought on that. Go ahead.
I think Pitt, I mean, like I said, I'm trying to understand the premise, or like what is thing, because I get it. Like Pitt's, it's funny because Pitt is a school that I use when Miami brings up rings. And I'm like, I don't ever, which I respect, I don't ever hear Pitt talk about we have more rings than everybody else, because, their rings came much earlier, like a long time ago, much like most of Miami's rings. But they do have a rich program in history. They also have something where we know from a historical standpoint that they don't want to just sit back and wait and let the landscape kind of wash over them, and not, because obviously if they didn't care, they would have never left the Big East. You remember Pitt was originally one of those schools in the Big East, and that's where they had their success, but they made a change to be able to come, obviously, to the ACC, which probably Big Ten at that point would have probably been a much bigger, much more realistic shift. But I think even going to the Big 12 for Pitt would be something. I mean, they really want to be good. They have the facilities, they have the actual connection to the NFL team. I think they have a really good city. That area of Pennsylvania plays pretty good ball over that way. So I think I could see
they'd be a natural fit.
Sitting back watching, hey, where do we fit into this? And Pitt's also been one of my arguments for a while. Like, I went there. I actually really enjoyed Pitt. Like, that's probably the best I've been treated as a media member, like ever. Like that athletic director was awesome. But I think they're a program that offers you something that, while they may not offer you the top tier, but they offer you a brand in basketball, they offer you a brand in baseball, they offer you a brand in football as well when they're on it. Because I actually, like I said, that's just my whole thought on just in response to that.
I'm going to take
Mike Parks, you did not hear that. That's called torturous interference. That is a word that I have had to learn, being sued, and that's a word that we want to avoid, because that would actually put us at a disadvantage. Negotiations have not started. Maybe some good old pals over a good drink may have discussed possibilities of what would happen in the not too distant future if maybe all of us weren't bound by contracts. But at this point, we are, until legally proven otherwise, we are not entertaining in negotiations, because that would be illegal. It's like a kid, like kids aren't doing negotiations with name, image, and likeness before they sign with the school. That's illegal. Not supposed to happen that way. You have to wait until you sign with a school, and then they can start talking about NIL contracts with you, because that would be we would never. No, that's not what we want. That's illegal.
Here's my guess on the collection of these schools, not in terms of specifics like they're going there and they're going there, but up until now, basically the way this is played out is these conferences survey the school in question and say, okay, we're currently making this much money and our television contract looks like this, and we've got this many schools, And then they figure, okay, if we add this school, their football program, and maybe some of the peripheries, education, basketball may slightly add or detract from that. But basically, it's a football decision to say, okay, Fox, okay, ESPN, if we add them, what does this do to our value? And then we got to split it between these other schools. Or if we get them at a cut rate where we're only going to give them half, like the Big Ten is currently going to give Oregon and Washington only half for I don't know how many years, then they make the decision. Did they add value or did they not add value? Now, the only way I see that going forward where it may benefit some of these periphery schools like a North Carolina State, like a Pitt, that if you group them together, where these Power 2 may not want to lose an entire region of the country and say, well, individually, Iowa State or Kansas State isn't worth it, but collectively, maybe they are because of the Kansas City market, the St. Louis market, and then just the heartland that they would bring. And maybe collectively, as groups, they would mean something to those conferences from a value standpoint.
Which hurts Pitt. You've already got Penn State, so I guess they're going to have to go helping the SEC there if that's going to be their particular value. But no, that's a very fun question. Chris, what do you think, man? You've been quiet for a little bit.
I just think that anyone that says that losing Florida State, and I'm not going to speak on Clemson, but anyone saying that I don't care if Florida State leaves the ACC conference because we don't play them, we don't do this, I don't understand why everybody has like goggle vision on. Like, we're only looking at what it does on the football field. We're only looking at what it does in basketball or whatever the sport may be. This isn't about the sports. It is into the measures of what they're worth. Florida State's not leaving because they don't want to play Pitt. They're not leaving because they don't want to continue to play the people that we played.
Yeah.
Florida State wants to leave because they're getting undervalued in a conference that's already undervalued. So it's simplicity to say, oh, I don't care who leaves because we're still Pitt or we're still NC State. Well, no offense to any of those schools because Pitt has rich history. They've done things in the past and all of those good things. But the truth of the matter is it doesn't matter what you've done. It's a matter of what you're doing. What are you going to do? What does your future look like in any conference? What does your future look like as far as what it brings to the table? And unfortunately, in my eyes, Pitt, NC State, and some others, Boston College, you're not valued in the market as a Clemson, a Florida State, a Miami. And Miami has been down for 20 some odd years, and you still aren't as valuable as they are when it comes to TV rights, which is where the money is going to be made for whatever conference that they therefore stand in. So you're looking at it from a very simplistic way by saying, well, we only play them only once every 7 years, or we only do this. That part doesn't matter. What if that conference no longer exists because the two biggest valuable pieces or three most valuable pieces decide to go elsewhere? Because what's going to happen is ESPN, which can opt out in 2027, which they will, when they opt out and they no longer pay the $42 million by that time, two per school, they're going to devalue that conference no matter who you bring in. They're going to have to devalue the conference in the portion of saying, well, now you're only worth $20 million a year. Do you think Pitt wants to stay around to make $20 million when they've been making $42? Do you think Boston College is okay with making half? Do you think the schools that are left in that conference are going to be fine with, oh, well, it was a good run while it lasted? I don't know if you've ever done this before, but if you've ever given a child something that they deserve, first and foremost, they get their tablet time, they get their video game time, and you snatch it away for no good reason. You just do it because you want to. How unhappy is that child? Well, now we're talking about adults. Have you ever done it to an adult? You ever told your wife, well, babe, we're going to go and we're going to eat a steak dinner once every week. We're going to do it once a night. And you take that steak dinner away for months. I don't know how well she's going to take that. So, and you're talking about for a much longer period of time. You're talking about what does that mean for the conference, everyone that's left. So to sit there and to give it simplicity is kind of ignorant, and I don't mean that to no in particular person, but you have to look at this from what matters in all sports, what matters in the United States. That's money. The moment that we keep telling ourselves that the integrity of the game, the history of the game, the game itself means more than the money. It may to fans. That might be true. But what matters to the world, what matters to those who make the money, it's all about the money. They could care less about what history you have. They could care less about what you did 15, 20, 35 years ago. That's not what they're interested in. They want to know how much money can you make them today, tomorrow, and 10 years from now. That's the question mark. So if everybody thinks that this is just going to pan out and everybody's going to be in the rightful place and no one's going to be harmed from it, you're sadly mistaken, because the Power 2 conference it's going to happen. It's already pretty much here, just not made public all the way yet. But once these two conferences in the SEC and the Big Ten pull from possibly the Big 12, but definitely from the ACC, what does that mean for the rest of the teams in the ACC? What does it mean for the rest of the teams in the Big 12? What does it mean for Mountain West? I'll tell you what it means. It means that good luck. We might see you once every 15 years in the playoffs. That's what it means, because you're just not what everyone else is. And I don't know if everybody noticed this or not, but regardless whether the Dallas Cowboys are garbage or not, and they are, but say they wasn't, do you know how much more money Super Bowls make if that team makes it to the Super Bowl? It's an ungodly difference in the amounts of money that are made when the most popular teams make it, the most fan-ized teams make it. So what college football is doing is something the NFL, I guess, if everybody said that it was scripted, why haven't they scripted a Kansas City Chiefs Dallas Cowboys game? Because that would make them the most money right now. Along with Taylor Swift with the Chiefs, oh my God. And the Dallas Cowboys, geez. Like, what would that bring to the table? So that's why it's not scripted. But what college athletics is doing in the majority is making it as scripted as they possibly can without giving each team a script. But here's the Power 2. These are the popular teams. And no matter what out of these teams in the conference of the Power 2 come in, we're going to make tons of money. No matter whom it is that comes out of these two conferences, we're going to make a killing. So, yeah, it's going to affect the other teams that don't get out and don't have a landing spot. It's going to hurt bad. And I hate that for anybody that's left out. But that's exactly why I'm happy with what Florida State's done. They are eliminating themselves from being a potential, comrade of all of that and being part of the have-nots. Like, we can't exist that way. We can't be a national contender if we're a have-not. We just won't do that. So that's my outlook on any of that.
Yeah, I love it. You brought up a couple things, two things I want to get. First, the comment that said SMU such and such won't make any money from the ACC in a while. Well, yeah. Well, that's kind of the point of all this. They devalued the conference. So, yeah, they're not going to get a check till they figure out what the ACC is going to be worth without FSU, because they were replacement teams from the beginning. When it comes to the ACC and ESPN, the ESPN has a right to extend it after 2027. And listen to Chris talk. It gave me a good idea of a great analogy or metaphor, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure exactly which one it is on this, but fifth year options for these NFL players. 99% of the times, that's just so the NFL can get another year or add a franchise tag to get a hold of something that's worth way more, so they don't have to renegotiate a whole new contract. That's basically what that option is there. And yeah, there's no chance in hell that ESPN's picking it up. And Chris was preaching absolutely right there, but yeah, as far as that fifth year option, think about it like that when it comes to the rest of that contract from the ACC or from the ESPN. It's completely one-sided. It never was like guaranteed, and that's kind of the crux and how this all started to begin with. And I agree with all the stuff about the Power 2 as well. Like, be upset, say what you want, but it is what it is. It's coming. There's no getting away from it now.
I think again, we've seen all the from TJ, from Tony Outmark. I always say his name wrong, but from Tony. For people who, I guess it's interesting the thought process that people have. And one of the most interesting pieces that Tony put up was, if I remember correct me, I think it was it 18 teams? No, it wasn't 18. It was like 8 teams. It was something crazy small. Make up 50% of all the television viewership. And Florida State was one of those teams that was in there. So when people say things like Florida State hasn't been on top, I understand you're looking at wins, and ironically, let's be for real. And as the kids say, if we're going to be anything, let's be for real. In the last 20 years, there's been 5 down years at Florida State. And of those down years, 2 of them, you reached a bowl game. If you look at the history of most of these people, Florida State, for most of my life, had never had a losing season. Like, I'm 40 years old. So, like, I'll be 40 this year.
Sorry.
So, I mean, when we're talking about Florida State as a brand, and also even ESPN, all these things, most iconic helmets, Florida State's always in the top 5. Most recognizable name brands, Florida State's. These are all polls that aren't done by Florida State. So when you talk about value, you could not think that a team that brings in, because I believe the numbers we were doing at the time was like 3%, 3 to 4% when you did the division. To not think that one program that could basically say that we control 3% of the overall television market isn't valuable to a conference that's going to want to negotiate a new TV deal, seeing as the SEC has just negotiated one. You'd be crazy. And that's just the truth comes down to those things. And those are the facts when it comes down to it. Now, when you look at it, again, this is all based upon projections. And when you have a team that, again, if you just look over the last 40 years, they haven't projected to have very many down years. I think saw somebody put it in there. Don't look at this as football. Look at this as a stock. Look at this as a business. If you have a business that for over the course of 40 years has only had 3 truly subpar years over the course of 40, everywhere you bring up the name, it consistently creates a buzz. It's still a brand. You're going to buy it. And that's really what Florida State's looking at their history and projecting to where the landscape is going. It would be a fool's mission to stay in the ACC at this point. And that's really what it all comes down to. We could talk about it all kinds of different ways. Is it right? Is it wrong? It's capitalism. And I think, and I got this from Tony. No, not from Tony. I got this from Doug, the attorney. The reality is this. If Florida State doesn't push this, if Florida State loses, what do they truly lose? We have to stay in the conference to 2036? They're doing that anyway. So, like, if you lose, you have to stay. If you don't, you actually get an opportunity to make money. But nobody's going to sit around and purposely lose more money. That would be my 2 cents on all of that.
And I think with what the Big Ten and the SEC are attempting to do, and I am fully on board with them accomplishing it. Not that I want to change the sport, but I just am not going to bet against them. I think that even if Florida State did lose this and they were forced to stay in the ACC, there is so much current being forced by the Big Ten and the SEC to change this whole structure that the ACC is not going to continue to exist if they can help it anyway. And they want to force the better products out of that conference and snatch them up.
I feel like when you talk about losing, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm curious what Chris and James thinks about this. To me, even if Florida State loses, like they get like the worst case scenario, they're still going to be able to pay their way, take over their fees, and get out. I think that's kind of the idea. The lawsuit is just about how much money it's going to cost and this and that. So, like, kind of to what James is saying, I think it's to the point where it just cannot be reconciled, and we'll see what happens exactly. But I don't think there's any kind of judgment that could come down that would keep Florida State from being out of the ACC by 2026.
Well, to throw more math in this, because I don't think, people that hate Florida State based off of what they do to their team. I'm going to base this off of math of what Florida State does for the ACC conference, which is the conference of those that are listening to this in the majority. Florida State makes 17.2% of all gap revenue, which therefore is the profit of what that number is. Not that's how much money they make the conference. That's to get into the black. So 17.5%, Florida State gets 7.123% of that. The rest of that gets split amongst the rest of the members of the ACC. Now, when you divide that into those, which was, I think, a total of 14 or whatever teams it was before we added 3 more, whatever the number is, when you split that up, there was X amount of millions of dollars going to all of these universities to help pay their bills or whatever it is necessarily they wanted to use it for, to go to their athletic departments. Therefore, when they fell short, they still made money based off of the positivity of the money that Florida State brings to the table because of the viewerships on top of everything else. But what the true number that matters to me is how much does Florida State make to get the ACC to the black? How much percentage does Florida State's viewership, along with all the rest of them, how much does it gain to get you into the black? Because very profitable, 17% is not terrible, but that's for the team alone. That's not the entire conference. 17% of that profit is Florida State alone. So how much is the totality of what Florida State brings? 31.9%. 31.9% of all the money off of the TV revenue, as far as the athletic department goes, Florida State makes them 31.23 or something like that. But 31% of all of that. Oh, well, that's still less than 50%. But that's not 50% of the conference. That's one team. That's one university that brings in the majority of the money. Clemson has been on an up trail until the past couple of years. The best that they've ever done is brought 8% of the profit in, and that was in their best years. Miami has been in here since 2002. Or 4, excuse me. They joined the ACC in 2004. The best that they've ever done is 2.29%. Boston College's best year is 1.86%. And you go down the line, North Carolina is like 2.33%. You're talking about in totality, not profitable, just totality of what you've brought vision-wise to this conference. It's why the ACC is not making money as far as the ACC network. That's why ESPN wants to drop it, get rid of it, because it's done nothing but cost Disney, ESPN, and ABC, all the allotments together. It costs them money to run this. So for there to be any profit, where does it come from? And the answers are there, just nobody wants to look at it. The profit comes from a majority of 3 teams right now. And the big drop-off from the top team, which is Florida State in the conference, that makes the most amount of money, profitable and not. The second one that drops down is almost an 8% difference, and that's in Clemson. Then you drop it another 4.5%, and it goes to Miami. And we drop another 2.2%, and we go down to North Carolina. It's a joke. Like, the biggest part of this that people don't want to see is like, hey, your cash cow, Florida State, for the ACC conference, once they leave, do you think honestly that ESPN is going to say, hey, we want to renew the contract till 2036 because you added Cal, you added SMU, you added Stanford? No, there's a reason why they're not paying them anything in the first place. All the ACC is trying to do is replace the 3 teams that they are fully expecting to hit the basically transfer portal for the conferences is Florida State, Miami, and Clemson. That's the first 3 that they're worried about. The next one is going to be North Carolina. Then it moves down to Virginia, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech. It moves in that order because they feel like they can hold on to the lessers longer because no one else is going to want them as highly potent as Florida State, Clemson, and Miami are, which is very true. So the other 2 conferences have time to grow where the ACC has no time. Their time's up. It doesn't matter who you add. And I asked James this question on Spirit Addicts. I said, James, in a perfect world, what team would you pull to the Big Ten? If we go to the Big Ten, what team would you pull with us? And rightful reasons, he picked Miami because we've played Miami for so many years. And yes, I think it would still be good. But in a perfect world, what I personally think this does, and this is a way out there prediction because it's never happened. They've never joined a conference. The perfect world, Florida State joins the Big Ten, and so does Notre Dame. And then what's the question? Then what? Money-wise, the Big Ten's beyond what the SEC can get to with whomever they add. It doesn't matter. What does the Big Ten want to do? They want to be the monster of the Power 2. They're tired of taking the small back seat or passenger seat to the SEC, which they've done for however many decades. They're tired of it. So what's the biggest move? How do you talk Florida State and get into the Big Ten? Well, they're about to do it themselves because they don't want to fall behind. How do you make Notre Dame want to not be independent? Well, they make $70 or $68 million a year based off their NBC contract. Well, you can offer them 89, 91, almost $100 million a year to join your conference. What are they waiting on? Why have they waited so long to possibly do that? Well, because at times the ACC is their biatch, basically, and lets them do whatever they want to and still get paid on top of everything else, on top of what they already get paid. Well, when Florida State's no longer in the conference, the value is no longer there. The ACC can't promise Notre Dame will pay you X amount of dollars because they don't have it. Now the money's not there. Oh, what are we going to do? Nothing. Notre Dame's going to move to where the money is because that's what it's about. This is how they get forced into a conference. Because otherwise, how do they get into the playoffs? How hard would it be for them to get in the playoffs to be independent? How much money would it take for them to be competitive? Are they going to fall $12, $14 million behind per year? Are they going to fall behind $20 million a year when this gets renegotiated? No. So they're going to
Once Florida State and Clemson ain't on the schedule anymore, Chris, that ACC partnerships, especially or Miami too, that ends it. They're going to have to go. Who are they going to schedule? The Pac-12's gone.
I know. So that's the thing is to sit there and for everybody to try to put their blinders on or their beer goggles or whatever it is that you're trying to do to yourself. Enlightenment of what runs everything in this country is money. Where does the most money going to come from? Where is the most value? Do you go and get Linux on your computers, or do you let Microsoft and Apple keep their shit on there because that's the most profitable, it's the most manageable, it's the best product out, right or wrong? The power two in tech right now is Apple and Microsoft. Well, I'm sorry that that's the way that college football is going, and it's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. I'm sorry that Apple and Microsoft are going to go head-to-head in college sports. That's not my fault. The fact is it's the most profitable possibility and probability. So what are they going to do? Everybody does what? More power, more money comes more power. More power comes more money. So I don't understand what we're doing. We're trying to drop to the effect of a bleeding heart mentality of believing, but this school has 30 years, 50 years of history. Well, that's history. That's a past tense. You know what past tense does for things of the future? Nada. That's why you have to look into the future. You have to program this to work in your favor so that you're not left behind as a conference or you're not just taking the passenger seat. That's what both of these conferences are trying to do, is not take a passenger seat to each other. So when you watch these two just titans battle each other back and forth, they're going to just dissipate everything around them. Because if you take out the small and you gain territory, you gain what? Power. And with power comes money. That's what they're doing, and we act like, oh, this ain't been done in this country. We've never done this. We don't go to other countries and take oil. We don't take poppy seed. What are we talking about? They're taking the TV revenue based off of the regionalities of who they can pull in. This is how you make the money. This is how you potentially get into the size, or at least close to what the NFL's been doing for the past 5 decades. Like what? I don't understand what we're questioning. Like the money is where everybody's eyes go. The eyes follow the money follows the people follow the money because they want to see it. It's what we're addicted to. We love college football. We love college sports. You're going to pay for it regardless of how this pans out. You might not like it. It might not be traditional. Why are teams playing in the wrong regions? Why is it cold for Florida State? Why is it hot for Notre Dame? None of that's going to matter when you watch all of these Titans clash with each other, and it makes all of these cities X amount of money. No one's going to care because they're all what? Richer.
And FSU and Notre Dame are far and away the top two entities. FSU for the football reasons and also the regionality to add to the Big Ten. I mean, it's nobody even comes close. And then Notre Dame just because they're a perfect fit with their regionality, just for a classic Big Ten team. That would be it. That would be checkmate, game over, signed, sealed, and delivered. Just everybody outside of the club begging to get in. Please let me in. Can I cross the red rope?
For as much as I would love to keep this going, especially Chris is on fire. Glad you could make it tonight, Chris. Always glad you could make it. Always, but especially tonight. But want to make sure that everyone knows where to find everyone. So, Chris, for you, it is, we got it right here. Sunday at 4:30, Monday and Thursday at 8.
Yes, sir. That's correct. That is
Perfect. Join Chris at Spear Addicts live Sunday at 4:30 Eastern, Monday and Thursday at 8 Eastern. Anything special going on this week, Chris?
Well, it could. If I get moved in time, there'll be plenty of special things going on, but I don't want to promise people something and not end up having a show, period. I've actually got I've got an extra show this week. It was supposed to be today, but it looks like it's going to be pushed till tomorrow. But it's going to be early in the afternoon. It won't be late because I don't like interfering with any of my people that do their shows at those times. But I have a special baseball episode and softball episode coming up with the lead writer at Spirit Addicts, which is over at Substacks. We're going to have a complete conversation and breakdown of the baseball team and also over the softball team. There's a lot of questions being had, so we're going to have a special episode about that. But make sure that you get over to Spirit Addicts at Substack.com because there's a lot of articles that Justin Hood has put out. He's done a phenomenal job with them. He also writes for FSView. So make sure that you give him a follow and subscribe to his Substacks, which is Spirit Addicts, but still it's basically his. I just let him run it. And make sure that you follow him on Twitter, which is Justin_Hood_. And check him out and check out the stuff that he's putting out. He's doing a good job.
And everybody keep in mind, as we've got the most people in here at the end of the show, that you can catch what you missed. So don't just take the 10 or 15 minutes here at the end. You can watch what you missed. Just rewind us and watch the entire deal. George, what's going on this week?
Man, we're having a lot of fun, and our days are going to be Tuesday and Friday at 7 Eastern, and then Sunday we usually do anywhere from about 12 to 2 o'clock. We just had the Marcus Brutus on, Florida State DB, national champion, so go check that episode out with him. And I'm trying to think if I have anything to announce. I don't think I have anything to announce as far as upcoming people, but we do have some fun stuff in the works coming up. My birthday's next Tuesday, so we're going to have a real special show there. But, yeah, just catch us Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 Eastern, and then Sundays sometime right there in the afternoon.
James, what do you have for us?
Just try to get up to 6,000 subs. Once we get to 6,000 subs, we'll do our money giveaway that we do every time we reach that 1,000 pinnacle. We gave $500 away right before when we reached 5,000. Right before Valentine's Day. Shout out to my guy, my band geek, Grant Gray. Or he may be able to take that and buy himself something to get to Ireland. But we're just trying to grow the channel, continue to grow it. We've got 2 shows coming up on Friday. Supposedly one at 9:30. We'll have former FSU wide receiver Cafonzo Thorpe. We're going to be doing our Dope Boys Chop It Up segment where we'll just, again, it's just a candid conversation. It's different in interviews. You're actually just talking to 2 guys. You're basically getting a chance to see me FaceTime a friend and catch up. So you'll get some insight, some things that you probably never knew about him. A lot of cool things go down on those. Go check out our old ones. I've done Travis Johnson, Matt Myrod, Lorenzo Booker. I think Xavier Lee. A lot of cool Bobby Bowden stories. A lot of other stuff that if people are fans of football, fans of FSU. Then we'll do my big show Friday afternoon. Or we may end up doing it right after the Cafonzo one, if I'm able to move some things around. But the big thing that we'll have next week is the NFL Combine. FSU has 12 players participating in the Combine. Miami has 5. I think Florida has 2. The goal is to be able to go check out interviews and get little snippets and things done on all of those guys participating from the Big 3 as well as Georgia. There's an Iowa cornerback. I like fast white boys, man. I have an affinity for him.
Cooper DeJean.
If he can skedaddle, I want to get him. I want to see him. So it's going to be a lot of different things. But the Combine is fun. We cover it a little bit different on my channel. And, did you hear about what the Big Ten is doing in terms of Pro Day, allegedly? Which I think is cool. I think, again, as they move to a Power 2, these are things that make you want to get recruited into these conferences. So you have the NFL Combine that happens at the last week of February going into March every year, right? Everybody doesn't get to go to the Combine. You have to be on 75% of NFL teams' draft boards to be able to get an invite to the Combine. Well, what the Big Ten is doing, allegedly, is a Big Ten Pro Day. So instead of individual pro days that everybody has, the Big Ten will have one big pro day that all of their guys go to. Now, for some people, that's not great, but for some guys who are lesser known schools, didn't get a chance to see something, now you'll have probably just as many NFL scouts attend that as they would have gone to like I hate to use this because I don't want to pick on any school because I'm aware of what Indiana has or doesn't have. But like instead of going to Indiana, which has maybe one player and a bunch of guys with hope, you get a chance to see everybody. They get to go to a bigger pot, see everybody, and maybe somebody get a chance taken on them.
Guys, I appreciate you being here, making this show work in your busy schedules and making this a priority. So thank you so much, James, George, Chris. Chris, I hope the move goes well, and we will catch everyone back here next Wednesday. Bring a friend or two or 50 with you, and we'll see you back next Wednesday.